Good afternoon again, everybody. Hey. My name is Matt Bridges, and I get to serve as the pastor of St. John's United Methodist Church. Thank you so much for coming to today's presentation by Immigration Policy and Rights in 2025 and the different community partner presentations of the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. Thank you so much for coming today. We look forward to knowing a whole lot of things or being confirmed on a whole lot of things. And how many of you, right before even this presentation, how many of you might have a question? I got tons, right? So you know, let's be mindful through this about what we can learn today and how we can partner as a community. Thank you for your presence this morning.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited that you all are interested in helping support our immigrant communities. It's such an important thing, especially in the crazy times that we're in right now. My name is Lauren Frummer-Pease, and I serve as the detention advocate with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. We're based in Albuquerque, but we have an office here in Santa Fe, and we have team members across the state of New Mexico and a few in El Paso as well. We as an organization provide direct legal services that are free to our immigrant community. We have a bunch of different teams at our office. I personally serve on the asylum and detention team. And so we serve a variety of detained and non-detained folks seeking asylum and other humanitarian protections here in the United States. So with that, I'm just going to go over a little bit of our agenda here. Michelle, if you want to put that up, awesome. I will give you guys a little bit of an introduction to the immigration system and how it's functioning, and then a little bit about the executive orders that have come from the White House in the last 6 months. And then we'll do a little bit of a transition to the rights of undocumented folks here in the United States, and then how you as an organization and as a church and as community members can be supportive of those communities. So with that, I'm going to give you guys this really intense big branch system that is most of the immigration system. Now, the first thing that you might notice up here on this slide is that everything comes down to the big executive branch up here at the top. Now that's the most important thing that I want to highlight here. The immigration system is inherently a very politicized process. Everything in the immigration system falls under the presidential executive branch. So with a president that is not kind to our immigrant community right now, that has had really dire effects on our communities. So underneath the executive branch, we have the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, and they house a lot of our actual enforcement operations. USCIS, or the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, are where the affirmative asylum offices are held. So folks that are not involved in defensive immigration court will submit any applications to that office. That's also where you would submit something like a work permit application or a green card application. They're the ones that have the authority to grant those sorts of protections. Now, the next branch over here with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection, those are our two immigration enforcement operations. And so ICE has a couple of responsibilities, but primarily they are responsible for all the areas inside the United States. So beyond 100 miles of our southern and northern borders, that's where ICE has their jurisdiction. There are a couple of different kinds of offices under their branches. We won't go too far into them, but there's the deportation officers that are in charge of enforcing deportations and removals. And then there's the Office of the Principal Legal Advisor, or OPLA. Those are the government prosecutors that will appear in immigration court and essentially try to make the argument for why people who are undocumented should not be here. Customs and Border Protection is sometimes wrongly referred to as Border Patrol, but their jurisdiction falls within 100 miles of the border itself. So they're slightly different offices, but they have very similar responsibilities. Over here under the Department of Justice is where the Immigration Court and Board of Immigration Appeals, or the BIA, falls. Again, I want to point out that those immigration judges are not normal judges. They are not elected in an election process. They are directly appointed by the Attorney General. They are really responsive to the president and their wishes. So they have direct commands. Right now, a lot of judges are saying that they have instructions directly to deport as many people as they possibly can. Are there any immediate questions on that system right here?
If you want to hold up just a second, we've got some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. There's a couple of seats here in the front, and I think a few scattered around the room. Awesome. While you all find your seats, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, I want to give some information about how folks can apply for different forms of immigration statuses. There is no general visa or just a general application that somebody can fill out to become protected or normalized or legalized here in the United States. There's an array of different applications and processes and bases for why somebody could become eligible for different forms of statuses. So family-based petitions for certain relatives of the United States citizens or green card holders are going to be the #1 category for how folks are applying for status here in the United States. This is typically for folks that are married to U.S. citizens or are immediate relatives, either the parents or children of U.S. citizens. There are also employment-based petitions that can be filed on behalf of an individual or a business, and those will be for either permanent or temporary statuses. There's a bunch of different categories that can fall under those, very specific rules. There's a lot of really special rules that make this category really, really complicated. I'm not well versed in that at all, but that is a category that's applicable. The third and final category that folks are eligible for potentially are the humanitarian-based applications. And we as the Asylum and Detention team focus a lot on these humanitarian applications. So asylum is going to be the #1 thing that folks are seeking. Folks also have the opportunity to apply for different visas like U and T visas if they're survivors of trafficking or crime potentially here in like they're victims of crime here in the United States. There are folks potentially eligible for different protections if they have been subjected to forced labor or unpaid labor. There's a number of different visas that can fall under this category, but the primary one that we're working with is asylum. And we'll go into a little bit more about what asylum really looks like here in the United States right now. But the main point is that there is no general thing that somebody can come to the United States searching for. Awesome. So just some quick facts about the immigration system as it is right now. I said that the family-based immigration is the #1 way that folks are coming to the United States. There's about 1 million people coming to the United States through those types of applications, with a few employment-based sprinkled in there, but the family-based petitions are going to be the #1 most common. In 2024, over 2.2 million people entered at the southern border through Mexico, either at ports of entry or along the border in the desert or the river. And that 2.2 million people, those are outside of that 1 million figure. So there's a lot of folks that are coming here to the United States. In 2024, about 270,000 people were sent to civil immigration detention centers. We're going to go a little bit into those detention centers. We have 3 privately run detention centers here in New Mexico that are for-profit detention centers that house civil immigration detention. Over 60% of the immigrants that are detained at these facilities do not have any criminal history, and almost an entire population are seeking asylum. That population has shifted a little bit now that we're under Trump 2.0, and we'll go into that a little bit, but there are, at least before the Trump administration, there were 129 detention centers here in the United States with a capacity for about 40,000 folks. Right now, there are about 52,000 people being detained here in the United States with new facilities that are trying to open every single day. They've been attempting to use military bases to house immigration detention. They've been opening these pop-up tents. So that is one of Trump's main priorities is to detain as many people as possible throughout their proceedings. The facilities here in New Mexico have about a capacity of about 2,000, and those beds are full at the moment. 90% of the ICE facilities across the states are for-profit prisons. They're run primarily by Core Civic, Geo Group, and by MTC. We have 2 Core Civic facilities and 1 run by MTC here in New Mexico. Cases take a really long time to be processed, whether you're going through the immigration court system or through USCIS, through that affirmative process that I was talking about earlier. There are over 3.5 million pending cases at the immigration courts and another over 1 million at USCIS. Those cases can sometimes take a couple of months to a decade. We just got a case that was processed last week that had been open since 2017 for a children's case. So, some information about the new EOs. There have been a lot, particularly on January 20th, and a lot of them are pertaining to immigration. The most important one that I'm going to highlight is the Securing the Border Initiative. This is a massive umbrella executive order. It's like 150 pages of things that are applying to the United States immigration system. But the most important things that you need to know is it allows the deployment of military and National Guard members to the border. This is increasing the militarization of the border, which is helping to target folks. This is really a dangerous process. But if you go down to the border right now, like if you go visit El Paso, you will see militarization at its height. The Securing the Border Initiative was intending to re-implement the Remain in Mexico program, which forces folks to wait in Mexico while they are waiting their decision of their cases. In April, a federal court granted an emergency stay that halted that. We're not sure how long that will happen for, basically until both sides can put together legal arguments and it will go to court again. So that's been a win for now, because that was a really damaging process that was occurring under the first Trump administration. The Securing the Border EO basically is an asylum ban. It declared the southern border as an invasive problem. And so it was criminalizing and the folks that were crossing the border. And we'll go into a little bit about the asylum ban, but it made it really difficult for folks to seek protection under those humanitarian-based categories. It terminated the parole programs for asylum seekers that are in detention. And so Michelle and I work with thousands of men who are detained here in New Mexico that have been in the facilities for anywhere from a few weeks to a year. And they are no longer eligible for those systems like parole to be released from detention. So folks are just waiting and waiting and waiting and in detention. Overall, this executive order was instructing DHS to detain and deport as many people as possible. Over the last 6 months, that's what we've seen. Those efforts are really, really strong right now. That's why we've been seeing ICE raids. That's why we've been seeing ICE traffic stops. That is all with the intention to detain and deport as many folks as possible. The refugee ban affected about 10,000 refugees that were in the resettlement process. I'm not super familiar with this one, but if you'd like more information, I'm more than happy to connect you with it. Birthright citizenship, that's one that has maybe gained a lot of attraction in the news. Birthright citizenship, there's just no way that it's going to be attacked any further. That doesn't have a legal basis, no matter if the Trump administration says they don't think it's constitutional or not. It is, it's in the Constitution. So we've not been super worried about that as an organization or as legal service providers. But the expansion of expedited removal has been massive. We're going to go over that a little bit as well. But expedited removal processes is this way that the Trump administration particularly, but other presidential administrations have used in the past, have been using as a tool to deport folks as quickly as possible with the least amount of due process as possible. And so I'll go into that a little bit on the next slide. I'll just finish this one. The new president has been criminalizing migrants since his first campaign trail, and this is not new. The migrant identity and the undocumented identity has been criminalized forever, but part of the way that the new administration has been particularly targeting that is through the Lake and Riley Act. You all have probably heard of that in the news, but the way it's functioning right now is creating this mandatory detention for certain folks with very specific criminal backgrounds, particularly related to theft charges, even if they're very petty theft charges that are misdemeanors. Something as small as a shoplifting accusation could make you eligible to be detained for your entire proceedings. We've been a little bit concerned about them targeting legal service providers. They've tried to go after bar numbers, things like that. But so far have not been successful, at least here in New Mexico. But we have seen the weaponization of legal access and limiting legal access. Michelle knows that very, very closely. We've been really, really frustrated by the legal access, especially at the detention facilities. With that, I'm going to give you guys some more information about the expedited removal process. So expedited removal used to only apply to folks within the 100 border mile range. So folks that have recently crossed the border, because you had to have been suspected of being here for less than 2 weeks in the United States. So that's still a very, very large population that was subjected to expedited removals, but under the Trump administration, it now applies nationwide to anybody who's suspected of being here for less than 2 years. That's a lot of people. That is millions of people that are now subjected to expedited removal. Expedited removal is a process that takes away seeing a judge. If you are placed into expedited removal processes, you basically have a deportation order. The only thing that can stop your removal order is if you are affirmatively declaring your fear of returning to your home country. If you affirmatively declare that you are afraid to return to your country, an asylum officer has to give you something called a credible fear interview. Under this administration, they're giving 212F interviews, which are a little bit different and even lessen the due process there. If the officer determines that you are given a positive decision, which means that you have a credible fear of returning to your country, you will be placed into regular removal proceedings and get to seek asylum or protection with a judge. If you are given a negative decision for anybody who entered after January 20th, you will be removed. There's no appeal process, you will just be removed. So the expanded expedited removal has been affecting thousands and thousands and thousands of people, especially the folks here that are detained in New Mexico. Unfortunately, in our work at the detention centers, we've seen that DHS is trying to apply expedited removal to people that have been here for even longer than the 2-year process, which is not allowed, but they're doing it anyways. At the facilities right now, we're also seeing people that have been here for their whole lives, folks that have entered when they were infants, folks that entered maybe in the 90s when they were resettled from Vietnam. The United States is targeting everybody that they possibly can. Now, there are a number of ways that you all and we all as a community can fight back from expedited removals. The number one most important thing is for anybody who is potentially subjected to these things. If you are undocumented, if you have maybe not a permanent or a temporary status, you need to know your rights. So that's why it's super important that you all are here, and I'm so grateful for you all giving such great attention to this. If it's absolutely necessary, it would be good to have proof that you have been in the United States for more than 2 years. Something like a state ID card that has the issue date could be really helpful. If it's necessary, it's good to show your lawful status. If somebody has evidence of their green card or something else, good to keep that on hand. Okay, with that, I'm going to go into a little bit of a Know Your Rights section. I want to preface this. I'm not an attorney. I'm a legal assistant, so this is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, I can get you in contact. Okay, so what to do if ICE comes to your home. Number one, first and foremost, do not open the door. ICE, as you have seen in the news, is using a number of tactics to try to force people to open their doors. They are appearing masked. They are appearing in hooded clothes. They are in sweatpants. They are not identifiable. Do not open your door for strangers. Stranger danger. If somebody comes to your door, ask for identification. ICE, if it is ICE, they will likely tell you that they have a warrant. Now, there are two kinds of warrants that ICE tries to use. The first is called an administrative warrant. The signature on there only has to come from their supervisor. It doesn't mean anything. An administrative warrant is not specific for any one person. It does not give them any more rights than the average person has on the streets. They are going to try to say, we have a warrant, open the door, open the door. If they have an administrative warrant, you do not need to open the door. The second kind of warrant is a judicial warrant. This one is signed by a judge. It is very specific towards one individual that they are searching for. Now, how can I tell the difference between an administrative warrant, judicial warrant? You'll know. If they have a judicial warrant, they do not wait for you to open the door. They will break it down. They will not let you look for a difference. So, most of the time, they do have those administrative warrants. But if you'd like to, you can ask for them to slide the warrant under the door, show you the warrant at a window, something like that if you are interested in seeing the warrant specifically. Now, if ICE enters your home, whether you want them to or not, maybe you left your door unlocked. That gives them reasonable authority to walk in and say, this was open, whatever. Maybe you open the door. Maybe you are on your way to your car. That has happened a lot. ICE can be waiting. There is a requirement here in New Mexico to identify yourself to any law enforcement authorities by your name, nothing else. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to give them any information specifically about where you were born, where you were raised, when you came to this country, nothing like that. ICE will ask you those questions. Maybe you're at a traffic stop and ICE tries to ask you where you were born. You don't have to answer. You do have to give them your name, but other than that, you have the right to remain silent. Now, this is similar at a workplace in a public space. You can always ask if you are free to go. Ask if you are free to go. If they say yes, you have no obligation to talk to them. You can walk away. We recommend you walk away quickly and politely. If ICE comes to your workplace, we encourage you to have a plan in place. Who will talk to ICE? We're going to talk a little bit more about you guys as a church and an organization, about you all having a plan in place, but are there staff ready to refuse ICE having access? Are they supposed to wait at the door for a supervisor? ICE is only allowed in the public spaces of any workplace. So, at a school, for example, if the school makes visitors check in at a front desk, ICE has to do the same, which means that any school administrator, any church organizer, anybody of those sorts has the right to refuse ICE's access. And we encourage you to utilize that right. Anywhere you are in public, if you are stopped, you have the right to remain silent, and again, asking if you are free to go. Okay, how we can be supporting our neighbors. Recording ICE activity is going to be a really important thing, both for our media coverage and helping people understand what's going on, and also potentially if ICE is violating people's rights. We would love to have documentation. If you see ICE in a public space, record, record, record. You have the right to record as long as you are not impeding on their operations. Now, this is really important for you all as individuals and community members to keep yourselves safe. You cannot impede with their operations. You can't try to pull an ICE officer away. You can't try to create a barrier between you and somebody. Do not get in their way. They can criminally charge you for that. They may try to confiscate phones. Traveling through TSA right now is potentially vulnerable to phone searches. If you are going through TSA, we encourage you all, even as maybe if you are a U.S. citizen, we encourage you to turn your phones off. Don't store very vulnerable information on your devices. If you suspect ICE activity, please notify the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. We have a coalition of partner organizations behind us and legal service providers and advocates that are working to support our community members and keep us safe. So please, if you do suspect ICE activity, get in contact with us. In general, having a blanket policy of refusing ICE in your workplace, regardless of whether there are any undocumented individuals in your place of work, deny access. That's what you can do to stand in solidarity. We are encouraging, considering a doorbell system at the entrance. I'm not sure as churches if you are required to leave your doors unlocked, anything like that. But I know that you guys, for example, have somebody who's sitting up here. That's a great way of screening who's coming in and out of the building. So, one of the things that Trump did that maybe was concerning to a church is that he rescinded the sensitive locations policy. And this was instructing officers to not enter enforcement operations at those very sensitive locations like hospitals, churches, courthouses, and schools. This was never an official policy that stated don't do it, you cannot do it. It was an encouragement against it. They always had the possibility to. But now that encouragement against it is no longer there. Even with the rescission of those policies, organizations and churches like yourself do still have the right to refuse ICE. We as organizations and as community members have no requirement to comply and aid the national ICE and immigration enforcement operations. So you still have the ability to refuse entrance. We have not seen ICE specifically targeting churches and hospitals and schools here in New Mexico yet. It's always possible. And we have seen them targeting courthouses. A lot of folks have been detained at their courts here in Albuquerque. So keep that in mind. We want you all to keep in mind that if you are taking affirmative steps to conceal somebody who you know is undocumented, you could be accused of violating the harboring of undocumented individuals law. I'll give you a little bit more information about that, but we want you to be very careful. So again, organizations and churches should not allow immigration officials into their non-public areas of their building unless they have the judicial warrant. Again, if they have that warrant, they're going to do it anyways. They're not going to wait for permission. But, maybe you catch them on a nice day and they do. So always good to ask if they are saying they have a warrant. We are suggesting that everybody has very well-defined areas of what is public and private spaces in their facilities. If you have a room like this, maybe it's saying for private meetings only, something like that. You are here for a very specific reason. You're not just anybody who's walking in off the street. And I know that's a little bit complicated with churches welcoming everybody and church services, things like that. But signage is going to be really helpful if there is any legal follow-up. Go ahead, yes.
I was in a meeting last week about this very subject, about nonprofit organizations, church institutions, and what their rights are. What we learned is that if we have something promoted as a public space in a public time, like a worship service, then we cannot bar. But outside of worship hours, things like that, we can kind of label however we feel necessary.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm really glad that you guys are taking those affirmative steps. But that's a great example of how you guys kind of have blurred lines sometimes. Yeah. Generally, you all should not be giving ICE officials or any other government officials really any information about the folks that you're working with or attending services with or providing services to unless they have the subpoena, the judicial warrant that is requiring you to give over that information. If ICE is here in your facility, the staff should inform ICE that they do not have permission. You need to explicitly let them know you are not giving them permission to enter into private spaces. The staff here, I think, are obviously getting trained on the valid warrants, but we also recommend that the reception or any other staff are trained on that as well. I want to make sure I'm not just repeating myself over and over again. If there is ICE in the building and you know of somebody that you're around that is undocumented, or maybe ICE is specifically interacting with somebody, you can remind them always of their rights, specifically the right to remain silent. You can also remind them to make sure to ask if they are free to go. So, how to not jeopardize your own safety. Section 1324A1A under the 8 U.S. Code. I don't even understand why they do that like that, but harboring of non-U.S. citizens. In order to convict somebody under this code, the government has to prove that you knew or recklessly disregarded that the person was here in the United States unlawfully, and that you either brought the person into the United States, transported them within the United States, or hid them from an ICE officer, or encouraged them to stay here. Now, that second part is going to be where you all potentially may get caught with the harboring initiative here. So what we're encouraging is that you be status agnostic. That means that you are not asking for people's immigration status. If you don't know, I don't know. They can't do anything to you if you do not know somebody's immigration status, because then you are not knowingly harboring, protecting, transporting somebody who is here unlawfully. As churches, you all are really great at providing good services and support to anybody in need, so I encourage you to keep that up. It doesn't matter if you're documented or not, you're here to receive support and love. Again, you're not an immigration expert, so who are you to say that somebody's here unlawfully? It's a little bit of playing naive on your understanding of somebody's status. So when in doubt, it's best not to ask. For churches specifically, this special section of that code gives a little bit of a workaround for churches specifically. If there's somebody who is volunteering for your services and is providing services as a volunteer, you can sometimes provide housing and board and travel and other kinds of expenses without falling under that harboring provisions, my apologies. But if you do have questions about that, we can connect you with the attorneys who know a little bit more about the specifics behind that. With that, this QR code is our New Mexico Community Defense Manual. In this big folder of things, you will find lots more information about the actual immigration system and how it functions, about the detention system and how it is working here in the United States and in New Mexico. And there are so many different manuals about applying for different forms of protection, applying for work permits, submitting different motions to the courts, how to communicate with the courts, anything under the umbrella of support that you may need to do something on your own can be found in this manual. I reference it every single day. Everything I submit to the court comes from this manual. With that, my contact information is here at the bottom. Again, it would be amazing if you suspect ICE activity to specifically reach out, but otherwise I'm more than happy to answer questions. Yeah, I'd love to open it up. Yes.
Is that the main number we should call if we see ICE activity?
So this number right here is our front office number. If you call that number, they will get you in contact with the right person. Yep.
And I have another question.
Yeah.
if ICE shows up with a warrant, would the warrant likely be to search for a specific person?
Yeah, likely so. I mean, so the administrative warrants can be specific or non-specific. The administrative warrants could maybe have somebody's specific name on them, I believe, but more likely they're going to be a very generalized warrant. If it's a judicial warrant, it will be very, very specified to one individual for a very exact reason. Maybe they have a removal order already, or ICE maybe found out that they have a pending criminal charge, and so maybe they fall under the Lake and Riley Act, and so their detention is mandatory, something like that. And the judicial warrant will always have to have a reasoning behind ICE showing up.
Do you have an access to the manual that's not with the QR code?
That's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and send you all a link afterwards. I can follow up via email, maybe with Mary Ellen and Matt, and we can get that out to you folks. Yeah, go ahead.
Two-part question. Do we as an individual have the right to see the warrant?
Do you mean if you are maybe
If
not
someone
the person
comes
that
to
ICE
the
is
house?
looking for?
Yes.
That's a good question. I believe you do. If ICE shows up maybe at your personal home and you are at the door asking for the warrant, they would need your own permission as the homeowner to enter.
Second part. Do we have the right to insist on their identification?
That's a little bit complicated. I think you can always insist that they identify, but they don't have to identify, is my understanding.
Because as you know, they're making raids with masks, so that tells you up front what their intent is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very normal. I think perhaps if they're unwilling to identify their actual, maybe their, like police is their badge number, you can definitely try to have them identify their office or their specific branch of DHS, something like that. A lot of times, DHS officials that are seeking to enforce, like ICE, will just have DHS police on the back of their jacket, if they're even in uniform at all. So that's one thing I would recommend. They may not identify themselves, unfortunately.
I have a question. If individuals see ICE around and targeting an individual and they start to record public and ICE comes in and tells you to put your phone away, must you put your phone away?
No. You have the right to record any of their actions at any moment. Yeah, as long as you are not impeding on their actions. Yeah. Yeah.
There are a lot of food pantry volunteers here, and as you know, I'm the coordinator there. We have some questions, and maybe you cannot answer them, but we need to know what we can do out on Barcelona Street, which is where we have them line up for the distribution. So they're lined up for a specific purpose, but it is a street. What our rights are then in the parking lot, which belongs to the church, and then our spaces in the church, or in the church itself, which is down on the other end and down below.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely I would redirect you to the attorneys who would be able to answer more specifically. My instinct is to say that since the parking lot is on church ground, you still have the ability to designate private and public spaces. I think you would likely have to have some sort of physical difference in the public versus private. Like you couldn't just stick up a post that says nobody beyond this point. Although maybe you could. I'm not sure. Yeah, that would.
My contact.
I'll connect you with one of our staff attorneys on that. Yeah. Thank you.
The Barcelona Street, there's nothing we can do, there's people are waiting in line.
On the actual street, given that that's public property, there's no way that you all can identify the private spaces, but you can still remind folks of their rights and stand in solidarity. And yeah, essentially it's trying to throw off ICE from recognizing individuals. So in big groups, that's always helpful. But yeah, unfortunately, there's no way that you can like make it your own space. Yeah.
Impeding. I understand physical impeding. What about verbal?
I think, again, I'm not a legal expert. My understanding is that it would be up to the discretion of the judge to make the determination about what crosses the line of verbal impediment.
So you don't have any experience with verbal things that people say?
No, I've seen a lot of videos where individuals are, yelling at ICE officers, yelling at their loved ones, and I have not seen any criminal consequences for those folks, but that's not to say that it's impossible.
What if you run in a situation where ICE is doing something and they're dressed in, like you said, sweats and with a mask, and somebody's filming them, and they ask you to do something, and you ask for their identification and they don't present it, then you have no.
Even if they do present their identification, you have no obligation to do anything for them.
Okay.
I think it would be extraordinarily rare, if ever, that they would ask somebody that's not in their own operations to participate in what they're doing, but you have no obligation to help them.
Oh, I didn't mean help. I mean, I wouldn't hold somebody.
Oh, I see. If they're asking for your identification or something.
If I ask them for their identification, they say we're in a what might be a public or private, it depends. And they say we want to go in and check all the people in there because we're ICE.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I'm sorry, until you can present your identification, I can't let you in, or I can't assist you in any way.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly what you should do, is continue to refuse.
And if they refuse to give you their identification, then you can do almost anything, right? Because they could be thugs just off the street.
Yeah, exactly. And even if they do give you their identification, like, we're from ICE and this is my badge, and you still don't have to let them in. The only reason you would ever have to let ICE in is if they have the signed judicial warrant.
Right.
Other than that, you absolutely should maintain, even when they're pressuring and feeling really, really intimidating, continue to refuse. That's the number one strategy, is refusal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about if they, you were saying you can film. What if they tell you, back up, turn that off? Do you have to back up? Do you have to turn it off? Because I could see where they'd say, if you didn't back up, you were too close to me, therefore we're impeding me.
Sure. So you definitely don't have to stop recording.
Okay.
You would never have to stop recording. Again, I would have to speak with the attorney specifically on this, but I do think it would probably be determined by the judge about whether or not you were actually impeding anything. And the video would help to know what's actually happening in a situation. They're always going to yell, back up, get away, get out of here, stop, whatever. Because we, as a community and community members that are in solidarity, serve as a barrier. And that's our purpose, and that's our number one strategy, is serving as that barrier. And so we get in their way, whether it's physical or not. They don't want us there. They don't want us filming the atrocities that they're committing. They don't want us reminding people of their rights. They're going to try to dissuade us from being there. That's very, very common. You can see the videos of folks that were arrested maybe at the ICE protests in the last couple of weeks, and you can see ICE is trying to get people away. You do have the right to be there as long as they can still make their arrest. Yeah.
I heard a suggestion that if these goons show up with no ID at all in their black vehicles, that we should call 911. What do you think of that?
That's a really interesting question. I think.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question was that maybe some advice was heard that if you see ICE or maybe hooded individuals and goons in their vans and the ICE officials, should you call the police to show up? Now, I think that's a very interesting question with a different answer depending on where you are. So in Albuquerque, for example, Albuquerque is a sanctuary city. The local administration, the local authorities have agreed to protect undocumented individuals. They are not specifically working to help enforcement operations. Now that's different from like the state police. The state police are working in collaboration with the enforcement operations. In Sandoval County, the sheriff's office is working with enforcement operations. So folks that have been pulled over on the side of the road, the sheriff's office will sometimes call ICE to arrive directly on the scene. So I think it would maybe depend on what locality you're in, who would respond if you were calling 911, and maybe that's unknown. They may not even respond to a situation. My partner is an emergency responder down in Las Lunas in Valencia County, and they have like their own very specific set of rules about if somebody is calling because there's an ICE operation, whether or not they show up. So I know that's really not an answer, but I wouldn't say I necessarily recommend for or against it either way. Yeah.
I recently read on that note that what you do when you call 911 is you say that you're witnessing a possible kidnapping. Because we can't tell if they're thugs just throwing someone in a white van or if there really are ICE. And it could be a kidnapping. And so if you do that, the local police must respond and get to the scene.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just for everybody to hear, they were mentioning that if you call 911 and mention that there's a possible kidnapping happening, that is a way for them to guarantee to show up. Whether or not they will be any of use, that's another question. But that's a great point. Yeah.
I just saw on, I think it was on YouTube, a situation where there were thugs. They were not ICE people, and they started grabbing women. And a policewoman came up to them, and she just gave them hell. And she got them back in their car, and they let go of her. So that was kind of an amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing, and I think that's why, especially if you're unsure of who is potentially targeting individuals, that would be extra important. Yeah, like if they're completely unidentified, unidentifiable vehicles, no badges, no uniforms, something like that, then I would, 911 would be where I would go personally, but in terms of whether or not that's a really effective strategy, I'm not sure. Yeah.
There was a much publicized incident, I believe in Vermont, where a network of like-minded individuals had a text chain and responded, communicating with each other about a possibly illegal detention situation, and they followed ICE to the center or the next step, and they waged a protest. And it was successful eventually.
Yeah, so that is something called participatory defense. It's something that my former supervisor, Sophia Genovese, is really keen on. Participatory defense means that the community members are coming together in solidarity, particularly in these instances, to prevent an arrest, potentially an illegal arrest. We had an instance actually a couple of weeks ago in Albuquerque where community members accompanied somebody to their ICE check-in. They tried to arrest them, they protested, and the person was released. So participatory defense campaigns can be wildly significant to an individual's success. We as community members and folks in solidarity absolutely should be organizing in those ways. Organized Power in Numbers is an amazing national organization, but they have a text hotline type thing here in New Mexico. Their information is in the manual as well. If you'd like to sign up for their messages, you can be on that line. If there is any future participatory defense campaigns, they will likely be communicated through that location. We at NMLC have a staff member that they're hiring for right now that will partly help organize those participatory defense campaigns. But as we move forward with this really intense and scary time, those campaigns are going to be really, really helpful. And so you all as community leaders have the ability to organize your own as well. And if you're interested in being in connection with us about helping organize that, please let me know. We love having people participate. It's one of our strongest tools. Yeah, Matt.
That's a good segue into the question that I have. Get in touch. You've given us one option to, if we suspect ICE activity, to contact your organization. As I look across the audience in this room today and many of our institutions, we have various high levels of literacy and privilege that we can literally move anywhere we want in Santa Fe. Are there ways that we can partner with your organization with the skills that we do have and the privilege that we do have in both English and Spanish and perhaps additional languages as well, that we can partner in form filing, in form filling out, helping people understand who may not have access to literacy in the ways that we have perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Super excited to hear that folks are wanting to get involved. Delaney Swink is our amazing volunteer and pro bono coordinator. We have a network of hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that do everything under the moon under our supervision. And we have folks that are assisting us. We have an asylum clinic on Friday that folks are helping fill out asylum applications and work permit applications. Those happen monthly. We have a Wednesday workshop where folks can help renew maybe their DACA or green card applications. So there are so many opportunities to get involved as a volunteer. We have opportunities for translation services. We as a team, Michelle and I's team, visit the detention centers on a bi-weekly basis. If you speak other languages, that's especially helpful, especially if you speak not Spanish and not English, that's super helpful. At the facilities right now, there are about 35 languages spoken. So legal access has been denied for so many people because of that reason. So if you're interested in accompanying us to the detention centers for legal visits, you can also do that. If you're interested in doing a social visit at the detention center, I would recommend looking up VIDA, V-I-D-A. It's the Volunteers for Immigrants in Detention Advocacy here in New Mexico. Kelly McCloskey Romero runs it, and they do monthly visits to both the Torrance and Cibola County detention centers. That's a really great way to get involved and understand a little bit more about what's going on. And if you're interested in donating, we're always taking funds. So there's a lot of ways for folks to get involved. I can redirect you either to my email address or just directly to Delaney Swink. Her contact information can be found just on our website, or I can post it and send it all in an email as well. Awesome. Any other last questions?
Wonder about asking permission, may I leave now?
Mm-hmm.
If they say no, what is the response?
If they say no, they are supposed to respond truthfully. If somebody is saying no, you are not allowed to leave, it means they will be arrested and likely detained. In that case, what we as community members can do is, if we know the person, it's really great to know specifically their country of birth. If the person has already been in immigration proceedings, they'll have something called an A number. So having those pieces of information is super helpful because we can try to, and there's something called an ICE detainee locator, and we can look them up using their A number and their country of birth. If you don't have their A number, you can have their birth date and their country of birth and their name, and we can find them using those systems. And so that's going to be the first really important step in us as supports and advocates, is trying to find the person and getting them in contact with legal service providers and community members, their family probably. So that's going to be number one. Number two, you can always let us as legal service providers know that somebody was detained. You can try to get information from context clues about where they're going. There are multiple ICE offices in New Mexico and Albuquerque specifically. They'll usually take them to the Watson Road ICE ERO facility and then transport them likely to either Torrance or Cibola or down to El Paso. Yeah.
Hi, I'm from the League of Women Voters, our citizens full of people. We have a different relationship with the community in that we give information to people in tabling situations, event situations. One of our major purposes since we got the vote for women back 105 years ago is to get information in the hands of citizens. Do you have things that are printouts, that are things that we can provide to people? That's why I was coming here today with all these people and saying, this is what we intend to do. We need your materials. Perhaps other people can also supply things to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to send you to the defense manual. This is going to have like so many different packets of the rights of undocumented individuals is going to be one section. There's going to be information about the different like immigration applications and statuses. There's going to be information about how to navigate the court systems. That's going to have so much written material that you yourself are more than welcome to print hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies and disseminate everywhere. That's the goal.
Okay, and that can be gotten how?
Yeah, so you can scan the QR code here. It'll take you directly to it, or I'm going to send Matt and Mary Ellen an email afterwards with a link directly to it as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, if not, thank you all so much for having us here. It was lovely to talk with you all. Thank you so much for being engaged. Like I said, you all are the strongest form of resistance that we have. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I believe this concludes our presentation, and would y'all be willing to stick around and answer personal questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
more questions? Okay.
Michelle and I will be over in the corner.